So, yes, I suppose we should talk about some old Primordial records. You have a choice. It's like one of those old choose your own adventure books. You
Yeah.
can do, it's kind of pick the choice, talk about old Primordial records or discuss, for example, bikes and the TT racing or First World War, kind of like the evolution of the tank or, which one, what do you think?
Well, the latter sounds more interesting, but probably no one wants to hear that. So maybe we start at the beginning with Nameless Dead, and
And then move on to the bike racing.
yeah, sure, yeah,
Yeah, you'll have to. You need to get a backdrop for behind yourself as well. Maybe with
yeah.
your face on
Well,
something like that.
if you eagle-eyed will notice that I do have a cushion behind me on my little sofa there, which is a sidecar racing cushion, which every self-respecting studio should have, I believe. But
Well, I mean, I
Oliver's Mount,
I will
Scarborough.
I will raise you a Don Dokken scatter cushion in the shape
That's pretty
in the,
good, yeah,
in the shape of a heart,
yeah.
where Don is drinking a glass of wine on it, surrounded
That's
by butterflies. Yeah.
that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Maybe people can discuss in the comments which cushion they prefer.
Well, I mean, these are the kind of big topics that people come to. The channel that doesn't grow, my YouTube channel, to witness grown
Right.
men generally discuss such pressing first world problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such as scatter cushions. Maybe we can move on to then haberdashery, whatever that
Yeah.
is. Or anyway, yes, right. What are we talking about? Okay, so the Name is Dead is what's it? 16 years old now, is it?
Uh, Something like that. Yeah, 2007, isn't it?
Well, I suppose for anybody who doesn't know, Chris recorded that record. And so what happened was that after Gathering Wilderness, often back then it was left for me to sort of discover a studio or somebody to engineer something or, kind of source where we would go. And we done Gathering Wilderness with Billy Anderson, and the kind of the end of it, it had sort of fallen apart a bit, and the studio wasn't really made for metal. And I think everyone really didn't really like the recording in the city at the time. Just meant people were coming and going. Oh, I'm going to go and have me dinner. I'm going to do this. I'm going for a pint. I'm this, that, the other. So they all thought, well, can we find somewhere that's in another country that is a bit remote, but that isn't too far away that we don't have to fly miles to, because they wanted to get the ferry, which is, in the end, I'm not sure what was the record that made me check out Foel. Because I mean, you might maybe explain where Foel is and all that kind of stuff and where it came from, because that was a studio where eventually I came across the website and contacted Dave, I think.
Yeah, I think was it not through? Was it not Will Palmer who maybe suggested it to you? Maybe.
Oh, that's possible. Yeah, Will Palmer Interwich. Um, you know, uh, Will Palmer the Charmer. Could have been. Had Angel Witch gone there, or had some Rise Above bands gone there? Maybe.
I've been doing a lot of Rise Above stuff um, around that time. Yeah, so that it possibly was Will, but yeah. Well, Foel. Bit of history about Foel. It was set up in sort of 72, 73 by Dave Anderson, formerly of Hawkwind, who played in Search of Space album, and he left that. He left after the album came out, basically, more or less straight away. And yeah, with the intention of setting up a recording studio, and he found this old farmhouse in the middle of mid Wales, near Welshpool, but about 12 miles out into sort of in the hills, and yeah, this tumble down farmhouse, bought it and did it up, turned it into the studio, and the studio's still going now. Dave sold it; he lives locally still, but now I'm by a guy called Mike Bew. But yeah, I saw Dave yesterday actually.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what the Rise of record that we heard from there that kind of convinced us. Was there some English band who released an instrumental EP or something that you'd recorded?
Capricorns maybe.
Could be Capricorns.
Capricorns had recorded there, but we only did. They did their second album there just tracked bass and drums. So we did, with their own producer. So, but we were doing a lot of, lots of stuff. But the studio had a lot of history with, heavy rock and metal, and pretty much since since it started really with Dave, with this sort of Hawkwind connection,
Well,
and
my bloody Valentine went there as well, didn't
they
it?
went, in the 80s, yeah. Napalm Death had been there several times. Goldflesh had been there. Yeah, lots of stuff, lots of heavy stuff.
And I think what appealed to the lads at the time was that they could pack the amps that they invariably probably never used into the back of the car and drive across. And then, because it's sort of quite remote, and that if you didn't have a car, you were really just sort of stranded there, I suppose. It's quite far from the nearest town. But I'm pretty sure that's what might have convinced us, was that kind of the tone of some of those Rise Above things that were coming out of the studio at the time. And it just seemed sort of convenient in an oddly inconvenient way, because of course you still have to get the fucking ferry from
it's it's kind of one of those old school residential studios where they're obviously rock. I think Foel might have been the second or third privately owned recording studio ever made in the UK.
Really?
Rockfield, I think, was the first. That was 67,
Wow.
I think. And that's just down the road. Well, I'll say just down the road. It's Monmouth, a bit south from here, but and then Dave. So yeah, it's there's a lot of history there, and one of those places. Once you go there, you're there, and you can just focus.
Yeah.
On the sort of task in hand, really, and you've got the house separate. You can chill out.
I've talked before about that on the podcast for people who obviously aren't in bands and don't really know how things go recording. But there's a whole. It can be really good to be completely separate from the temptations of civilization. So and also from the temptations and the ability that you can be sort of hauled back into, taking part in text arguments, and and you're sort of hauled back into society. It can be good to completely get away. Of course, one of the problems is that because bands generally aren't professional anymore, and they don't have as much time off, and they'll have to fucking work. You have to balance between how many days can you possibly spend in the studio against potentially being able to go and play live. So I think we did a whole thing in didn't we? Wasn't the first week 6 days recording and then 5 days adding bits and mixing? So 10 and a half, 11 days to Nameless Dead?
Yeah, maybe not even. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it was something like that. It was, 1 week. Yeah, possibly about 6 days of sort of initial tracking, getting pretty much all the guitars, bass, drums down. Maybe a little bit of vocal even as well. And then he came back whenever it was, a couple of weeks later or something, to fix a couple of bits, do some extra lead bits, and then mix them. I think we mixed the whole thing in about a day and a half, I think.
Add all the Casey Chaos backing vocals and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
We might return to that, but we'll get sidetracked off down some other avenue. I think the thing was that we'd always we'd been over to Academy in the Rios, or not in the Rios, in Bradford before. And we'd been there in '94. We'd been there in '97. We'd be there in 2002. And the old Academy was a really great studio with lots of character in it, but it had sort of become a bit digital and stuff. So we were trying to look for something that we thought had a kind of 70s, 80s sort of vibe with old amps and stuff. And certainly Foel was just full of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've seen photos of it from early 70s. The very first band that recorded in the studio as it is now was the Stranglers.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So they did demos, and I'm not sure, it was on YouTube for a while. They had Peaches and whatever versions of those tracks. Anyway, that was the very first session that was done in the building that is a studio. And I saw some photos from it years ago, and the place looks exactly the same. Well, at least the live room does, anyway. The same colour, the same it was So it's definitely got that 70s vibe, which a lot of bands love, especially guitar bands. They look at it and they turn up, they walk in the control room, see a big old desk, see a load of old stuff, and they go like, "Wow, I'm in the studio. This is proper."
Well, that's part of what, but that's sort of the sort of romanticism of that can be, I suppose, realistically sort of inspiring. The fact that
Yeah, yeah,
you're surrounded by, just old stuff has a certain atmosphere to it. That
yeah,
like we recorded in the final studio in Academy. I'm not sure if it even still exists. Really, it was just literally like a front room with a Mac and stuff, and you're just like, oh, okay, amps we can get feedback on, or and the drums were just done in a side room, and it just didn't really feel like you were recording an album at all.
yeah. Yeah, I think depends on what sort of music, but I think for a lot of guitar bands, heavy metal, rock, metal bands, you always sort of those sort of classic bands from the 70s, 80s will always be the kind of you know the benchmarks for a lot of that stuff. And if you feel like you're in a place that looks like somewhere where Black Sabbath recorded,
Yeah.
then if you want to sound like Black Sabbath, you'll be like, it looks like Black Sabbath, it's going to sound like Black Sabbath. So.
Well, I mean, look, if they could make an album in what was it, half a day or a day or something like that, the idea of, I mean, I used to tell people like, yeah, I think when we did Two Names Dead in like 10 or 11 days, they look at you like, wow, fucking hell. Whereas now, at the time in 2007, that seemed like a really short time. But now people seem even more pressed for time, and sometimes they end up bringing all the fucking files with them.
Yeah,
Their own stuff they record at home.
hmm
I mean,
yeah,
but the thing about what of New Slapping with Primordial was that we would make one album and it would go like swimmingly. It would go kind of without much adversity. And I remember The Name Is Dead was just like summertime, just everything kind of clicked in. And then of course we did Redemption a couple of years later, and it was the complete opposite, really. Because I mean, I got like sort of swine flu, I guess it was, or a little whack of swine flu, and it was winter, and it was like snow drifts up to this, that, and the other, and
yeah.
everyone was sick and pissed off, and
Minus 18 one night as well, which was
yeah,
pretty extreme.
-18. Did it really get that fucking bad?
Yeah, yeah, one night.
And I would imagine that we were probably the whole building was just heated by that one little heater at the front, probably, was it?
Probably, yeah, yeah. There's there's proper central heating in the band house now,
Oh,
but yeah,
now,
there wasn't then. Yeah, there wasn't then.
because what happens then? Then you get an album after that was fine to make, and the one after that wasn't. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just even and odd numbers or something. There's some sort of gremlins of luck are sort of at play with every odd number. But that was definitely kind of one of those recording sessions where everything sort of clicks into gear and everything just seems to fall into place very easily, which isn't really the case most of the time, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it. Yeah, just being. I mean, it's a long time ago now, but I just remember it being pretty straightforward. You guys just turned up, put the parts down, and
But
there
you
was
were
no
only but you were only 23 though, right?
23, 24. Yeah, I think 24, maybe 24. But yeah, I'd only been there. I'd been so I was the in-house engineer at Foel for 6.5 years, and so I've been working there for maybe a year and a bit by the time you guys came.
Mm.
So I knew the place pretty well by then, but I was still pretty young, obviously.
So people
But
people are often I tend to vaguely sort of skirt over all the sort of technical details, but there's plenty of people who kind of want to know what sort of desk and what are you doing? Are you mixing to tape, which we weren't, or what exactly were you doing for miking up and amps, and what does Kieran this, that, and to do the other? So I'm going to have to ask you some exciting technical questions.
yeah, sure, yeah. So I mean, the way that well, bit of I mean, I still work. I work out full now. A lot of the time, freelance now. I live down the road, so
Mm.
it's very handy for me to go there and bring bands in and that sort of stuff. But the way I work now is still pretty much the same as the way that I did with you guys. But so the studio's got Pro Tools, obviously, like pretty much every, like 99% of sort of pro studios runs Pro Tools. But the desk is an old Trident Series 80B, which is a lovely sounding console. It's actually from '87, but it's sort of design and layout and stuff is very 1970s kind of style. It looks 70s in a big wooden frame and everything. But yeah, they're a pretty classic desk. They've got good sounding preamps and EQ. Sounds warm but kind of punchy, and it's got a kind of like a hard edge, which is good. We wouldn't have used too much kind of basically everything went through the desk. It was recorded through the desk using some of the bits of the old outboard that was there, compression wise and everything, and then it was mixed back through the desk again as well, so up on the desk, old school, again using combination of outboard reverbs and compression and EQ on the desk, and then obviously some plugins and things like that as well for things. But amps wise, I think we used all the guitars on that album were done using my Matamp GTL, which is still a Matamp broken. But
that famous one.
That one, but when it used to work, and all the guitars doing that. And I think Mick brought a Marshall Governor pedal.
Yeah, because that was quite a step for us, because before that, I think Kieran had done a lot of stuff with what you call those German amps. We got some sort of endorsement from them for a little while, and I've been sort of annoying the lads to try and move away from doing too many layers of guitars and too many harmonies in the middle, trying to loosen up the dynamic range and stuff, and maybe easing off on the distortion a little bit. So I think we went a bit more sort of old school with the tone on that record, though.
Yeah. So it was the Matamp. So just Kieran and Mick, left and right. Lead bits in the middle or something like that. But there's not a ton of guitar overdubs on it, I don't believe.
No.
Maybe No Nation on This Earth, the end, there was maybe like 2 harmonies on there, that sort of stuff. But yeah, there weren't crazy amounts of overdubs. And just a bit of a delay and reverb and stuff on the guitars for those parts. And bass I think was done through Dave, the studio owner's old Trace Elliott amp, which was previously apparently owned by Mark King from Level 42, apparently.
Wow.
So, and then the drum kit was an old 60s Premier kit, I think.
Yeah, because the old live room was sort of. I liked the way that back in Foel you could sort of, if you really craned over the desk, you could look down into the kind of old live room, and it was just kind of the floor of the barn. There would just be stuff everywhere.
Yeah,
it had a sort of certain atmosphere to it when you're recording it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, originally they were, because the computer monitors are sort of on the top of the desk now, so they're kind of in the way. They wouldn't have been there back in the sort of 70s and the 80s when it was all fake. So they do kind of spoil that line of sight a little bit, but it's a necessary evil, really, because it's handy just to have them there when you're editing or whatever. But
I don't think.
But you can, full band can play in there live.
Yeah, I think we even maybe set up to do some guide vocals at the time. I can't remember. I remember the singing being pretty quick and easy. Though I've said this before on the podcast discussing the records, but Redemption, I got really, really sick. Like so sick I couldn't even walk up the stairs. And around that time there was swine flu knocking around Wales and stuff. And I'm convinced I got like not the full thing, but a whack of it, because I had to go there. I went to hospital and stuff, didn't I? Or down to some NHS.
You definitely went down to doctors, I think.
Yeah. And I remember not being. I remember sleeping all day, staying up all night, trying to take energy drinks, and I don't really remember doing tons and tons of pills. Not really able to do, or not really remembering an awful lot of doing the singing. But somehow we had about 2 or 3 hours every evening where it sort of went okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or am I remembering that wrong?
No, that sounds about right, I think. That album was just a bit more bitty, wasn't it? The way we tracked it.
And the end of it was
The mixing was fun as well. The emails back in the, because before there was proper Wi-Fi in there, and
yeah. But I've
yeah,
been talking. I did a few things like technical stuff about the kind of frame of mind you need to be in, and when you're mixing, and it's like you need to be in this positive, can-do frame of mind and be a bit sort of
mm,
gung ho but calm about it. As soon as you start to get stressed and pressured, like, oh fuck, we've got to be out of here, and that's despite trying to set out to do that, we ended up in that fucking frenetic, mad, madcap rush, and everybody being stressed. But it was mainly because we were trying to send emails of songs back to the lads. They were all working, and they take, they wouldn't be able to answer for 3 or 4 hours. And then the internet's bitty. Um, and I went threatened to pull the internet out completely, but just because you need to be sort of, when you're on a run, you've got to just kind of roll with it. You
mm,
can't, you can't just go backwards and go, oh, I need to go back to the bass drum sound from 2 songs ago and fix a thing. And I think we sort of, I mean, the band, we sort of didn't really a lot properly. We didn't really, how should we say? We just sort of dropped the ball a bit.
yeah, and the the way we were working then, sort of mixing up on the desk. So essentially, all right, the sound's coming from Pro Tools, so it's obviously a digital source, but
Mm.
it was mixed through the desk again. So it's an analog mix down. And so that means obviously as soon as you change something on the desk, turn a knob, change something on one of the outboard bits, when you go into another song and you change it to suit the next song,
Mm.
if someone wants to go back to the previous one, you got to
Oh yeah,
recall stuff. And the more recalls you got, the more difficult it is to get it exactly the same.
right. Yes, of
Um,
course.
so there was that as well, and it's, nowadays with people do more stuff in the box now. The plugins and things are so much better that you can work like that now more easily,
Yeah.
and it's less of an issue. But at that time we were doing it more old school, but still trying to mix the sort of doing stuff via email as well. So it was
Yeah. I mean, we
with the
worked
clock ticking and the time running out and everything. It was yeah, pretty stressful.
because we had to get a ferry, I think, at like noon on the Sunday morning, and at like 5 or 6 in the morning, we were still mixing the record, and there was another band coming in at like 10 a.m. or something stupid, wasn't it?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, yeah,
Because people, it's kind of you. No matter how much time you allot yourself, you always kind of feel like, oh, we could do with an extra half a day or day when you're really under pressure. And then I always find this with mixing, and I know it's like the power of suggestion, where you've been thinking about something, not paying attention, and then you zone in and you go, is the bass loud enough? And as soon as you've said it, and then everybody else is listening to the same thing, everybody else begins to think about the same thing, and it's sort of, it's kind of it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something, that you've mentioned it, that now everybody is going to change it. Oh, just change it a bit, or.
yeah, definitely. With mixing, um, I find it's best to try and get something happening pretty quickly.
Mm,
Go on your instinct, and
yeah,
generally, if you can do that, then what you end up with is more or less there. As soon as you start as soon as you start doubting yourself,
mm,
then you just kind of need to stop, really, if you've got time. If you haven't got time, then you just got to plow on. But if it's best if just to stop and then just give yourself, I don't know, a day or whatever, a few hours maybe, or just even half an hour or something, just to kind of clear your head and then come back to it again.
yeah. I
And then
mean, but
you'll try and get that initial, just like overall big picture
yeah,
view again. When you're focusing on tiny things, and then someone says like something like that, you're like, oh,
yeah,
I don't even know anymore now, and
yeah, yeah. I mean, I find as the singer, and sort of, sometimes you can get a more broader overview because you're not listening to your own performance essentially when you're listening to the music. So you're not focused in necessarily on your playing, and trying to get that broad overview. Well, I mean, rock or metal, whatever you want to call it, guitar music is. I think it should be sort of instinctual, in the
mm,
sense that if you want to capture that lightning in a bottle, you don't capture lightning in a bottle, so to speak, by over analyzing every frequency range and going back and pulling everything apart. I just don't. It doesn't really feel like heavy metal um, thrives best in with that sort of mindset.
yeah. I mean, obviously you need to do that as well. The sort of, from a engineering point of view, you need to be able to do that as well. But it's best to do that when you're in a place that you're happy with, and trust that you're in a, that the overall thing is good. Then you can then focus in on the tiny little bits of automation or whatever, without having to suddenly change a fundamental part of it, because then that's when you kind of can get out of your depth, quite easily.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, it's like kind of. I guess when you keep adding things to the painting, and all of a sudden you realize I fucking can't go back. And well, it's much more easy now, as you say. Well, what was the first thing that you mixed then? I mean, did you go from doing live sound into studio sound? I know we've probably talked about all this stuff before, but just for the sake of the podcast and stuff. But what was the first thing where you went, okay, this is what I want to do, is mix records?
yeah, no, I've only really ever done studio stuff. I've only really been interested in studio. I guess coming from a musician point of view, I just always liked the kind of making of music or listening to music. I love listening. I've always been a big fan of listening to music and buying records and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I didn't even really consider that there was such a job, that was a recording engineer. I hadn't even kind of, when I was a kid, I hadn't even sort of really considered it until one of my teachers mentioned that one of their students did this for a job, and I just thought, well, hang on a minute, that's the perfect job for me. I've always been nerdy, into gear and all that sort of thing.
Mm.
And I thought, wait a minute, this is a job that combines music and the technical aspect of things, which is something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I just was like, overnight, just like, well, I'm going to do that for a job then. I didn't at the time consider that it's actually a pretty tricky field to get into, and there's not a lot of jobs, and you have to make a lot of your own work yourself. But
yeah,
the naivety of it probably helped me a lot, because I didn't doubt that I couldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think also the timing, probably. I would imagine it's a much harder field to get into now, and especially with now the sorting creeping sense that everybody has. That, I mean, I was only having a discussion with somebody about this today, and I was saying, theoretically, if a band brings a digital desk with all their presets with them on tour, maybe they don't need a live sound engineer anymore. I don't know. Is AI going to take those jobs? Is it going to take the lighting job? Is it going to take the mixing job? I mean, certainly you can already send. I was looking at, which is a totally different discussion, but I was already, a friend of mine was like, yeah, look, here's the mixing app. You tell it what you want things to sound like, and it will just keep firing them back at you.
Right.
I mean, I'm not sure how soon we're going to get to that point, but certainly, if people are needing to save money, I can see things like that. I mean, you're already seeing things happening a lot different than when you started, almost 20 years ago. So,
yeah, I mean, I think from a if you're in a band, obviously you can record yourself. It's not very expensive now to get a setup where you record yourself, but as soon as you start going down that road, you actually realize that recording is not that easy. It's pretty, it's actually quite a difficult skill to get into. So the more you go into that, you then find, okay, well, as soon as you master the basics, then you're sort of like, well, you know what? It could actually sound better if I bought this thing, this microphone or this sort of preamp thing. So that you buy that, and then you start spiraling into a situation where you've built your own recording studio at the cost of many thousands of pounds or whatever. So there's that point of view, but also you can't. It's when you're recording as an artist, it's you want to be able to go to the studio and just focus on yourself, your performance, and the band's performance and that sort of thing. You don't need to worry about the recording side of things as well, but also having someone that can actually, with experience, that can guide you through the process, especially if you're maybe new to it. You might be nervous, you might have confidence issues when you're suddenly on your own in front of a microphone and the rest of the guys are watching you. They can hear every, if you're the singer, for example, hear every kind of crack in your voice. Having someone that can guide you through that process and give you the confidence that you need, make you feel comfortable and relaxed. Same for any musician. You can't get that from a plugin.
No, true. I guess what it is just lately this is the sort of the, whatever you want to call it, the motif of conversation of society, trying to figure out which jobs
Of course, yeah.
are going to be put up against the wall by AI and automation over the
Yeah.
next couple of years, and what's going to survive and what isn't. I mean, it's natural to be, I suppose, grimly fascinated by where that could leave the music industry, because
Yeah.
I
Oh,
know,
I've no doubt that these things, will come into play but you'll end up with even more so. I'm sure there'll be something that is actually that can produce quite good results, but everything will just sound exactly the same.
yeah, or
Um,
it will sound just exactly like your album. Um,
yeah.
that's what in my head I'm kind of thinking to myself. If you brought your own, let's say for argument's sake, digital file plugins of your album sound, and you've got a digital desk run by AI automation, it's already programmed, preset, just bring it, plug it in, you have the same sound no matter what you play on in every venue, and it figures out the best, the sort of equivalent volumes. I'm no. In my head, I'm just thinking, I've just been going through, kind of everybody's life, trying to figure out how to start a conversation with them about how it's going to disappear.
Hmm.
To try and sort
Yeah.
of annoy everybody. I'm succeeding moderately, including myself. I mean, I'm just trying to. I'm wondering about what parts are going to be replaced or what's going to become obsolescent. But as you say, there probably will be a percentage of people who will move in the other direction. Hopefully, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm hoping with all this stuff, is that there will be always, hopefully, 10 to 20% of people who will want to see live music and will want the real thing, will want this, that, and the other, who will
Hmm.
resist the sort of body politic of society, who will just be like, oh yeah, avatar of a pop song made by AI, who cares? I mean, maybe I'm
Hmm.
being a bit too negative, I don't know. Well, that would be usual, wouldn't it? So,
Yeah. I mean,
it stopped you selling meth on the streets of Welshpool, so I mean,
well, yeah, the bomb drops out the market there really a little bit, so
yeah,
had to do something else.
get into fentanyl, that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, though? I mean, the process of technology, I'm just curious as to what exactly will it come for, especially when it comes to music industry stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, from a sort of recording process, I do think that you still, it's like having another member in the band. Like
Mm.
each member of the band adds an element of their personality, their expertise, their experience, whatever, into a band, and you get obviously that same sort of equivalent when you go to a studio with a producer who has all that experience from doing it for many years. They will, you know, impart some of their sort of personality, their experience, their skill onto your album. So I think there'll always be a call for that, but obviously, yeah, you do have to pay for that, and people, you know, will. But they're probably, if the technology gets better, people will opt for the cheaper, i.e., potentially AI equivalent of it. Sure, but I
Mm.
think
I guess
the
one of the
art will suffer.
yeah, oh, without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was having this discussion today about lighting, and I was thinking to myself, if you know what lights are in every venue, and you have your presets, and you have your preset board and everything, and you have everything linked into the same set every night,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I know there's probably going to come a moment where somebody's going to go, well, why are we paying two flights for somebody to stand behind it and do under 250 euros a day? But there's probably lots of people who are thinking, well, how can we do this without employing any bands at all?
Yeah, well, yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, bands certainly are annoying. So I mean, there's yeah,
Yeah,
but I mean, from a lighting point of view, I'm sure that probably. I mean, if you're a band that goes out with a click track, so
mm,
everything is to a click,
yeah.
then yeah, you probably don't need a lighting engineer at all. If I mean, to be honest, like I don't really know anything about lights.
Mm.
I don't know how many gigs I've done. We've never had a lighting engineer, Conan, so
Yeah, yeah.
we've always just been like whoever the light person is. If you even, sometimes obviously there isn't one. It might be the sound guy that does some lights, or there might be a dedicated lighting engineer.
Yeah.
So if there is, then great. Obviously it makes a big difference. When you have someone good, it makes an amazing difference. You don't really notice it when you're playing as such, but if you see back video and you watch the other bands, and you're like, oh shit, the lights are awesome. Really makes a huge difference to the audience perspective. But yeah, if you're just everything is click track MIDI sort of thing, you could just have someone to set that up. And like you said, if the lighting rigs in the venues that you're playing in are compatible, then surely you could, there's the technology there to do it all automatically. But
hang on just 1 second. Yeah, well, people will probably, I guess, not just know you from recording the Primordial albums, but also as the bass player of Conan. But what I find fascinating about Conan is that the band's popularity has sort of been done in a very, very old-fashioned way, considering we've just been talking about technology moving on and taking people's jobs. But Conan's sort of popularity is mainly based on, kind of relentless touring model, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the band, sort of the rise of the band, as like you said, has been very organic, really. John sort of started the project back in 2006, I think, and not long after that, got in touch with me to record, because he liked some stuff that I'd done with my old band and Slumatics from Belfast.
Oh yeah, Slumatics, good band,
yeah. So he heard that and sort of approached me to record some demos initially, and then it took the band kind of didn't really do anything for a few, and it was a couple of years later that he finally booked in and we recorded the first album. Some people call it an EP, but I class it as an album. But the first Conan record anyway, which was done in 3 days, record and mix 3 days. The band I don't think had even played a proper gig, done anything like that at the time. Just did this one recording, sent it off to some labels, kind of like old fashioned, like, what do you think of this? And at the time that it was such a insanely heavy sounding record, bizarrely kind of heavy, and the way John's vocals and stuff just kind of weird, so weird, and the tempo of the guitars are so so down tuned, so slow, but then with this kind of quite sort of busy drumming style over the top of it, a bit almost kind of, well, not really jazzy, but a lot of cymbal work, and it really was quite a sort of unique sounding record, really. And people were just immediately like, what the hell is this band? So it started touring, and they quite quickly, about a few months later, came back and recorded another thing with me, which ended up being a split with Slumatics. Then we did another album. By this time, this is with 3 different bass players that have come and gone on the different recordings. And then John and I, eventually, a few years later, we ended up setting up a studio together, which was Skyhammer Studio. We recorded very soon after that studio opened. We recorded the Blood Eagle album, and then the previous bass player Phil left, and John asked me if I wanted to join it. So that was the end of 2013, and so here I am, sort of almost 10 years later, about to leave to America again on Thursday. We just did so much touring from when I joined. I mean, the band had done a lot of touring before then, but then when I joined, the touring really ramped up, and we've been all over the world, really. North America a lot, played in South America last year, Australia, New Zealand several times, to Russia, Japan, all over Europe, obviously.
And it's really been like a sort of an old school way of doing it, almost like a 70s. But I suppose there are still bands who do it this way, but it becomes more difficult and more difficult. But very often the kind of van touring route only works until you can get to that 100, 120 people a night threshold to make a little bit more money and sell a bit more merch and slowly grow on that. If you keep going round and round in the same 25 to 75 to 100 people sort of route, I think it's like the law of diminishing returns or something. But something
Yeah,
something caught on for Conan, and then it sort of started to, it just sort of started to grow and grow, right?
yeah, yeah. The band has got, you know, a very strong fan base. You know, which obviously can't, you know, can't be taken for granted. It's something the band's obviously worked for, but you know, these people are there and they keep coming back, and it's absolutely brilliant that, you know, that they're, you know, strong. You know, like I said, strong fan. I mean, so many people could turn up with Conan tattoos, you know, and it's just like, wow. It's obviously, you know, you'll have the same with Primordial. Primordial, I guess, obviously completely different sounding bands, but similar.
Well, we don't have Johnny King's luscious hair and luscious locks to rely on to bring the punch.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, Johnny obviously has to work extra hard for my contribution to that. Isn't so good, but you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, lots of some, yeah, real diehard fans of the band that have supported us, you know, for many years, you know, and which is amazing. And but yeah, we've always been a sort of a live band, really. It's, you know, it's all about, you know, going back to the, you know, discussing, you know, bands playing with the click tracks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Conan, no way, like it's just old school amps, loud, just, you know,
you must have seen, I've been on tour and I've played with bands, and I've just been like, watching from the side, looking at whoever it is, a Kieran or something, going, that doesn't sound like they're actually playing it. It seems to me like sometimes it must be more hassle than it's worth to like not be playing. Oddly enough, for some reason I was watching when I probably should have known better, but I was watching you know, kind of fuck ups of old bands on stage, and I was watching Motley Crue, and it was clear that Nick Six wasn't playing the bass for the song, and the guitar was layered under, because it was a big guitar mistake, was layered under the backing tracks, and you're like, oh, something's going on here.
Yeah.
But I mean, old bands, okay, fair enough. But I mean, we've toured and played with young bands who are doing it, and you wonder, why isn't this more trouble than it's worth, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do it quite a lot with, you know, some bands. It depends on how complicated your album is, I guess. You know, with how many members of the band you got. Say you're a 4-piece band, but your album is packed full of overdubs, you know, vocal harmonies, all this sort of stuff. And if you want to try and bring that on the road and sound like your record, you know, some cases you have to, you know, you have to go down that route. Or say there's lots of like keyboard stuff, or, you know.
I don't mind that so much, or as much. It's when it starts getting into somebody is like not actually playing the guitar, but
because they can't play it.
It's guitar or something, and you're like, what's going on here? You know, like a couple of backing vocals, or sorry, keyboards, or okay, you know, look, I get it. The bass player of Wasp pretends to sing the backing vocals. I mean, look, come on, or whatever. But or some bands, you know, they're kind of pretending with the backing vocal thing. But there's some bands now, like I said, you've seen, you're going, I don't know. I mean, is the lead vocal live, or is the, you know, I'm not going to say who they are, but or is the guitar player? Is there another rhythm track going on, or I don't know. It somehow feels a bit disingenuous to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, having like a lead vocal or something like that would be that'd be a dangerous one to. You get that one wrong live, it's embarrassing, isn't it? But
that's what I mean. That's what some of the arguments I saw online were going, and they were saying, oh, you know, Paul Stanley. I mean, he's like 70. He's not singing his lead vocal, and you're going, well, what's happening is somebody at the desk is maybe blending in his main vocal with a little bit to help him out now and again. He's like 71 or something. So
yeah,
I still think these dudes can sing, but they're just singing over some backing tracks. I mean, I don't know, it could be me in 15 years playing to like, I don't know, 18 people in Hull on my comeback tour with just like a bunch of 21-year-olds and me.
Yeah.
You know, dyed
Alan and the Primordials.
Yeah, dyed beard and the whatever, trying to you know, kind of mime my way along to singing. That's way too hard for me to do now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you're supposed to disagree. Which do you prefer, being in the studio or being out and playing gigs then, though?
I mean, to be honest, I think I've always preferred the studio from a, you know, I'd say like from from a sort of creative point of view, I love the creativity of the studio. You know, the way that and the sort of more relaxed attitude. You know, it's I like, you know, studio sessions to be pretty chilled, and everyone can just not like sit around scratching their ass doing nothing, you know. But just if people have fun in the studio, if people feel relaxed, then they'll perform at their best. I'd say, you know, generally in my experience. And obviously a little bit of pressure is good, but you don't want people to be like so much pressure that they can't cope with it, you know. So
we all know those stories about bands. Well, we know bands who do this, who just end up fighting and arguing and punching the heads off each other all the time, you know.
well, yeah.
Getting fucked up every night. We've done our bits of that, but thankfully not really anymore, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of creative tension's good, you know. But generally, I like the atmosphere of the studio session where it's kind of fun and relaxed and that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously touring is good. Touring's great, you know, especially if you play like some good gigs. It's, you know, it's a great experience and nice to be out and about and all that sort of stuff. But you know, I've got two little kids now as well, so life's different for me now than it was when, you know, 5 years ago or whatever. So it's I've just got that weighing in my mind, you know, when I head out on the road, you know. So
yeah, it's a totally different thing. I mean, people are going to probably ask me then. I mean, the Conan live stuff. I mean, what's the fucking pedal amp situation that gets that sound?
I mean, it changes. But for me, the bass has been the same pedal for many years, which is the level 42
the level 40, the level 42
sound. Yeah, it's the thumb. It's all in the thumb, you know.
That's a reference. That's a reference that no one under about fucking 45 is really going to understand, you know. Go watch
Mark the
42 video.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, go on.
But no, for me, it's just a Boss HM2, old Boss HM2. So that's just that's the, you know, and then into whatever amp. No, I mean, I use an Ampeg, which we used on the last on the Primordial album, but
yeah,
I can't be asked to tour with that now because it's just too heavy and it breaks all the time when it's on the road. So
you used to cart around your own backline all the time, though, didn't you?
Oh, we do cart around our own backline, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, we just got for bass old PV solid state stuff. That's just like reliable and sounds good into 8x10s and 1x18s or whatever. John is always changing his gear all the time because he just loves buying gear. So his pedals change, his guitars change, his amps change, but his guitar sound more or less is the same. I mean, it changes a little bit, and but it just
and Johnny just brings that child's drum kit with him everywhere, and just, you know, that's
yeah.
Wasn't he told that by Igor Cavalera?
Well, it was yeah. So he doesn't have that drum kit anymore now. So we bought him a nice drum kit, a DW kit.
Oh,
so yeah, that's I won't embarrass Johnny with that story, but
I see. The Conan gravy train just rolls on and on for young Jonathan King. I mean, look, but yeah, you're going to America in like 2 days or something, right?
Yeah, Thursday. Yeah, so I fly out 1.
I think that's one of my biggest sort of regrets over all the years of Primordial is that we only ever really managed to tour America 3 times. We hopefully can do it again, but it just became, we got an awful lot bigger in Europe, an awful lot quicker, and we just didn't really, you know, this comes back to what we talked about in the part 1 of this, is that just being a bit, you have to work if you're in a band. You know, the idea, so many people come up and go, you know, they assume that even Primordial is a professional band, and you're like, you're not even 20% a professional band. Like the idea of living in Ireland, one of the most expensive countries in the fucking world, and making enough money to like live and have a family and pay a mortgage, it's complete nonsense. Of course, it doesn't work like that. So the idea of putting in all the grunt work in America over and over and over again to get to a place where you make a little bit of money and then not play in Europe because you only have like 2 or 3 weeks off work, it was just kind of unworkable. And that's something I sort of regret, because it would have been nice to be able to go over and tour and play more in America around about when we were 20 years younger, you know, like 24, 25, 26, and establish a fan base. But you guys, I mean, how many times that tour in America now? 6, 7, 8?
Oh yeah, I don't even know. We went over first in 2015, so I'd been in the band like a year and a bit. And yeah, the first tour we did with Mantar actually
Oh
from
yeah,
Germany.
cool band. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that first tour we did we I think we broke even. I think just about. Um, but it was which is great to be able to break even. But we did that at a time when the band's sort of popularity in Europe was growing, but we were able to go to America, and although we weren't obviously as well known there was still some interest, and so we didn't feel like we were taking a massive step back by going over there.
Mm.
And then we just been back every year since then, obviously pandemic aside. And
It feels like the kind of music that somehow to me might resonate more with a sort of American culture or something. Maybe that's me being
it,
too,
it
too
it
vague about it. I don't know.
yeah, I mean there's for that sort of the sludgy doom kind of scene over there in the States, there's a lot of that stuff. And obviously, going back to the early 90s with sort of I Hate God and Buzz Up and all those sorts of bands, there's always been there's been a sort of a strong scene for that sort of stuff for quite a while, really, and we've sort of slotted into that, which has been
And
great.
it's and the resurgence of the whole desert fest stoner
Yeah,
kind of whatever stone this that and the other. I mean, 10 it feels like 10, 12, 14 years ago that wasn't such a big thing. For the last 6, 7, or 8 years, it's just come back with a fucking vengeance. That all that stoner stuff.
yeah. I mean, I think it definitely it sort of it peaked maybe maybe 7 years ago or something like that. But it's still there. I mean, the Desert Fest thing and
Yeah.
we played Desert Fest last year in London,
Mm.
and we played in the Roundhouse, and it was like rammed. And then there was all these other venues going on at the same time. Desert Fest is spread over the various venues.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, um, it's there's still a strong scene for that stuff. Obviously, your bands like Electric Wizard, sit at the top of that, at the sort of the top of the sort of pile. Other bands like that, Sleep,
Mm.
you know, all those kind of bands. But yeah, they'll pull big crowds now.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's I find sort of when it started to come back again. That's kind of when I joined Conan. But I mean, I'd been into that sort of music since I was teenager kind of thing. So I sort of missed it because I was too young when it sort of first kicked off in the sort of early 90s, whatever. But I got into it in the sort of later 90s, I guess.
Mm. I think it works on
Because,
two. I think it works on two levels that it remains popularity. One is the sort of 70s witches of Instagram, Electric Wizard are the coolest band in the world,
yeah.
Sabbath-y, fucking satanic imagery stuff, which just
Hmm.
always remains cool. That just always, you
Yeah.
know, more Satan, more cool, whatever. And then that's backed up then by nerdy dudes wearing, like shorts in winter with trucker caps on, who are like super gear dudes. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
the witches of Instagram and the kind of clutch guy sort of keep that scene kind of welded together with a certain level of popularity. If I can, being the black metal guy who looks in from the outside in the window.
Hmm.
But those two things seem to facilitate that scene's staying power, especially the just the dudes who just love the dome, that thing, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess, I mean, it's, I sort of joke
I
that
mean,
it's kind of like,
we Detour are playing right now as we talk. And last
yeah,
night, Corrosion of Conformity played, and COC had like 600 and something pre-sales, and I'm pretty sure BD will be stuffed with people.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, I think the sort of, a lot of, when we play, a lot of our fans are same kind of age as us, like me and Johnny were 40, there's a lot of 40-year-old kind of blokes.
Yes.
John's like what 70 or something, but like yeah, there's a lot of like we sort of joke that it's just like the sort of Stone of Doom thing is just dad rock now. It's just like what was Dire Straits many years ago. Now it's people listen to Conan.
Level 42 even, you know.
Yeah. But we still, there's the Desert Fest thing is where you go there and there's like, there's like a lot of young people here as well, and it's like, so it's obviously still going, but it's long may it live for us anyway.
What's
playing.
What's the next thing that you're going to record, or is it, do you know, or what's happening?
What with Conan? Or
let me ask you this: if you was some band that you would like a bucket list band to record, to have a go at doing something, who would that be? I mean, obviously, Primordial, you've done that, so to be the second list.
Twilight of the Gods, maybe.
Nice, nicely played.
Yeah.
Maybe
I'll give him a card.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know really. I mean, obviously, if Tony Iommi rang me up and said, I really want to do a project, then that would be cool, wouldn't it? But
we'll get Glenn Hughes in to sing, and that
could
work.
I don't know really. It's kind of hard one to. I mean, there's plenty of bands I'd love to work with. I mean, obviously, I'm known obviously for the Conan side of things and recording a lot of the stonery, doomy kind of stuff. But I also record as much sort of more, extreme metal, black metal kind of stuff as well. And working with any of those sorts of legends from that field would be great. Even sort of working with someone like Abath or something would be awesome.
Well, who would you now, if you were going to say, somebody said to you, who would be the the best engineering jobs, the best engineers, the classic engineers? Is there a couple of people from the past who come to mind if somebody asks you that? Those kind of 4 beer conversations.
Oh, I mean, obviously someone like Martin Birch. You listen to all the stuff that he recorded. Obviously, he's known for his Maiden connection and stuff like that. But before that, in the 70s, he was recording Deep Purple, Wishbone Ash.
He did Sabbath as well, didn't he?
Yeah. And those records sound great. I mean, I'm a big fan of the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, sort of hard rock, early sort of forms of metal, prog stuff, and you listen to those albums, and it just sounds still like, it's like, how did they get those bands to sound like that? They sound, the recordings are great. I mean, obviously they don't sound like a modern album, but in many cases they sound better for it. Do
you think that's something that's like a lost art? I have to listen back to some of those records and just think, I don't know if somebody could make A Number of the Beast now, or Heaven and Hell. You could, possibly, I'm not sure.
I think those days, I mean, all those sort of classic albums, obviously you listen to, like, there's plenty of like rough sounding stuff that was recorded. There's probably a lot more rough sounding stuff that was recorded in the sort of early 70s that you listen back now and you'd be like, even if the music was cool and it had a vibe, you'd still be like, yeah, but okay, but it sounds, it doesn't sound hi-fi. But yeah, the really good stuff, like engineers like Eddie Offord, who recorded like Yes and Emerson Lake and Palmer and that sort of thing, and listen to those first few sort of Yes albums or ELP albums, and it's like the sound is amazing. Like, and there's so much stuff going on there. There's so many overdubs as well, and they probably would have recorded that to maybe an 8-track or possibly 16-track. 16 track in in some of the biggest studios. That's not a lot. You'd have to do a lot of bouncing to tape as you were doing your overdub. So that's a lot of committing sounds and levels that once you've got a few, once you bounce that over, you're not going to be able to change that frequency because and so you had to have a real foresight as to how it's going to sound at the the mixing stage to be able to commit to these things. And you don't have to do that now. You have to, you don't even have to record actual really with microphones for a lot of it. You can just plug stuff in, guitars, just put an amp sim on. Even if you're going to reamp it later,
Yeah.
you don't have to commit when you're recording now. I mean, I don't like to do that, obviously, but
yeah. I think that's probably what it is, isn't it? Really, that sometimes maybe back in the 70s and stuff, the bands had to play with a sort of precise instinct and commitment. That any less than that performance wasn't gonna, whether you're the fucking Ramones or you're Yes, you commit entirely to that, however many minutes you're doing of that, because there wasn't any going back to tinker with everything. And I think you're also dealing with bands who probably rehearsed every fucking night of the week.
Yeah, and played all the time.
Yeah, being in a band was a band. I mean, that's what struck me with Primordial when we first went in to record. Or even still now, it's like, because you're not a band who rehearses all the time, you're not a professional band, you don't bring your gear on tour, you get what gear you're given. If you were to like go into Primordial rehearsal, you'd probably go, okay, well, this doesn't, I mean, it still doesn't sound like, it's not our rehearsal room full of our gear and all this kind of stuff. And like you see in documentaries of 70s and 80s bands, like you're pretty sure Priest rolled up with all their stuff and they're just like, okay, here we go. Rolling Stones mobile unit, British Steel. This is the sound of Judas Priest, because they're a fucking well-oiled machine. It's very hard to be a well-oiled machine sometimes these days, I think. Or maybe that's just my own experience. I don't know.
Yeah, I think. Well, but if you were a decent band and you had decent money, on a decent label, there was good money to go and record an album. So you could afford to just focus on the band.
Yeah, I mean, if you were Dokken, for example, you had the money. Sorry, just thought I'd distract
you. So if you professional band in the 70s, you had a big advance from a label. You didn't have to have a job. You'd be the band the label would organize tours for you, so you'd be on the road a lot, and you'd be sort of honing your skills on the road, and then you go in the studio and you'd probably have a decent time in the studio as well. And so that's it's easier to make it, I suppose, a good album with all those things. I think obviously you've got to be a great band as well, but if you weren't a great band, you probably wouldn't be in that situation in the first place.
No, and they capture a certain kind of life and energy to them that I think really, like we always have a strict thing with Primordial, which is like no trading files. We're not going to try and write remotely with each other. We have to be in the rehearsal room together to get the energy of being, around each other and stuff, the creative energy, because I just can't see how heavy metal and rock is made in a remote sense with everybody, just adding their bit and then send it off a file and, okay, I got this record back, great. I don't see how that's conducive to making a good rock record or a good metal record.
I mean, from a Conan point of view, definitely we are in that same kind of same sort of situation where obviously the genesis of most of the riffs essentially start with John, but we need to be in a room together to actually get an idea of actually how it's going to go, and that's how we've done all the albums that I've been in the band on. We just get together. John will, okay, I've got a riff, and he'll start playing it, and then we listen and then join in, and then that's when we start like sort of chopping it up and what about if we try this, or I'll do something on the bass there, or Johnny will play a beat.
It's a human process, and the more we remove, I think, humanity from that sort of human process, the more we encourage what's maybe coming down the road in a couple of, within a very short space of time, where, I mean, you might be in the studio recording something, you're going, I'm not sure we really need a bass player for this. You just tell AI what to do, what the tone is. Can we have this in the style of Jaco Pastorius, please? And you never know. It'll just make your bass line for you. I think that, I will say this, I think that the writing is very much on the wall when it comes to pop music and soundtrack music. When it comes back to this AI thing, I think it's going to be very hard to, to make, not hard, but it's going to be hard. The uncanny valley of rock and metal music is going to be a little bit more difficult to penetrate. But I think for pop music, where I also think the fans of it don't really care necessarily, I think you'll have Avatar pop stars, if we don't already, songs written by Avatar, and I don't think anyone's going to give a shit. And especially soundtrack music, which has been a big, nice cash cow for people for a while, making computer game and soundtrack music. I think this has to be a done deal.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, obviously they're sort of elements of the music business I have no sort of knowledge of it. You know, I don't work in pop music. I wouldn't even know where to begin if someone came to me and was like, I want to make a pop record, you know, like a sort of an electronic based pop record. You know, I would be like, yeah. I mean, I could record.
But you could. What about your old beatboxing skills?
Well, yeah, but that's analog. See, I mean, yeah, I'm much more of an analog guy. You know, yeah, beatbox. That's me. Yeah.
Yes, that's what they called you, wasn't it? Yeah, I don't know. I suppose it's because my mind is like, you know, circling around the drain with so much of the stuff. I think about it quite often when I think about things in the music industry. And then you go back out and tour, go back out and play a gig, and you go, oh yeah, okay. As long as 10, 15, 20, 25% of people resist and want to still be in a room with other people, then some area of this will be fine, you know?
Yeah, I mean, from a heavy metal point of view, you know, people go to a heavy metal gig just to go and listen to loud music and get drunk and, you know, have a laugh. And that's like,
well, you know, you say that, Chris, but I'll tell you what, I see precious little shenanigans and carrying on at metal gigs these days sometimes.
Well, yeah.
People file in, file out, and they go, oh, babysitter, let's go home.
Well, yeah.
No, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to a gig, watching live music, I think it is something that's a fundamental part of human culture, you know. It's been a part of human culture throughout all societies that there's a record of, you know, throughout history. So
sure,
it's something that I think will be,
well, you know,
will be hard to get rid of. But at the same time, like you said,
they did.
You know, I was talking to this with.
They did get rid of it for 2.5 years, though. So you know.
Well, yeah, true, but I don't mean get rid of it like that, but I mean get rid of the want for it, the need for it, you know. But I was talking just with my wife just yesterday, I think, actually, about, you know, friends of ours who don't you know, they like music in as much as they'll have the radio on, or they'll hear it on the TV, or they'll just put on, you know, like Alexa, play some music, you know, whatever. It's just like, and so that will be their only, that'll just be music. And, you know, if they've got kids, they'll grow up like that. And you know, in our house, I've got loads of old records and whatever. So my kids grow up thinking that, you know, my little lad Joey, he thinks that probably everyone has loads of old manual records.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean,
you know, like what
they should.
Well, I mean, they should, but
that's part. I mean, I think what Spotify represents, people don't really understand the full nature of the societal influence of Spotify, the whole "you will own nothing and you'll be happy" principle. Because like, we both inherited cool record collections from our parents, and they had records, they had things, tangible things that you own. What do you give your kids now? A link. Here's your link to your login code, if even. And the idea that you can have the same connection to a sort of art, if that's how everything is handed down to you. That's the thing that I think is the most difficult to get the head around. And also because parents just aren't fucking cool anymore. They don't have cool vinyls to hand out in the most percentage, I would say, you know. Yeah.
Well, my mum and dad have still got their records, so I had to buy the albums that I
yeah. I'd say that too. Yeah, I bought a Fairport Convention record or two. You know. Yeah. It's just that it is that thing, though. I mean, what often you think about it. Well, what are you going to leave or hand down to your kids? Is it a login code? I mean, that's a terribly depressing principle for art, really, isn't it? And music.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I know you're one for the big picture, doom and gloom sort of on every. Just like, I mean, yeah.
That's my raison d'etre.
I have to worry about that for my kids.
If you take that away from me, I won't have anything to talk about.
Yeah. for me, for my kids, they for better or worse will inherit my old records, even if they want to just put them straight in the bin.
They will get some Manowar records as well.
Yeah. I've got 2 boys, so they'll have to fight it out for who gets this, like Hail to England or whatever.
Hail to England.
Maybe divide.
Well, on that note, fighting the world. Just feeling I'll let you go and get off and pack your bags for your American tour and all that kind of thing.
I've got to finish mastering about 3 albums as well before I go. So crack on with that.
Well,